At 4:03 local time, the Western Pacific 340 nautical miles southeast of the Miyako Strait is displaying the specific quality of darkness available at this hour and latitude in late October, which is complete, uncompromising, and interrupted only by the navigation lights of the USS Ronald Reagan Carrier Strike Group, moving in formation at 14 knots on a standard transit that has been routine since 2100, and that the watch sections aboard each vessel have been managing with the systematic attention that nighttime open ocean formation steaming requires. The sky is clear. The stars are exceptional. The sea state is too. Everything about the tactical picture at 4:03 is exactly what the watch section briefed expected it to be, which is to say, unremarkable, which is to say that nobody in the Combat Direction Center of USS Ronald Reagan has reached for anything urgently in the past 3 hours. This is about to change. On the island of Hainan, at a facility that commercial satellite imagery has been documenting for 3 years with the patient coverage that commercial satellite operators provide when a location appears in enough intelligence reporting to become commercially interesting, the final checks on a DF-21D anti-ship ballistic missile were completed at 0347. The DF-21D is China's carrier neutralization weapon, a 2-stage solid-fuel ballistic missile with a maneuvering re-entry vehicle designed to strike moving surface targets at ranges exceeding 1,000 nautical miles. This is what the American defense community has been calling the carrier killer since approximately 2009, when the weapon was assessed as operationally credible, and the name has stuck in the way that names stick when they are operationally accurate enough to be useful. The DF-21D is designed to do one thing: find a carrier strike group and put a warhead on it from a range at which carrier aviation cannot respond before the warhead arrives. It is designed for this purpose by serious people who spent 15 years and considerable national resources developing it, and the Western defense community's assessment of whether they succeeded is not dismissive. This channel treats the DF-21D with the respect the DF-21D warrants. What it does not treat with equal gravity is what happened next, which is less about the DF-21D's capability and more about what the DF-21D's test tells the people watching it. The launch occurred at 4:03 and 17 seconds. 47 seconds later, at 4:04 and 4 seconds, the overhead infrared detection architecture logged the boost phase signature. This is the fastest reporting cycle available in the current constellation, and it is fast because the constellation has been positioned since approximately 2016 with the specific intent of providing early warning against exactly this launch profile from exactly this launch area. The infrared sensor did not need to be repositioned. It did not need to be tasked. It was looking at Hainan at 4:03 because Hainan is one of the places that the early warning architecture looks at continuously, and continuously means that at 4:03 and 17 seconds, the sensor was already pointed at the right place and was already recording what it needed to record. The boost phase signature, the specific thermal output of a DF-21D's first-stage rocket motor at ignition, was transmitted to the appropriate processing node and reached the Carrier Strike Group's command system at 4:04 and 11 seconds, 54 seconds from launch to notification. The notification populated simultaneously on the displays of USS Ronald Reagan's Combat Direction Center, USS Antietam's CIC, both Arleigh Burke destroyers in the forward quarter stations, and the Aegis BMD command net that connects the formation's sensor picture to the response architecture. All of it at 4:04 and 11 seconds, 54 seconds after a 2-stage ballistic missile left a launch pad on Hainan Island. In the Combat Direction Center of USS Ronald Reagan, The officer of the watch looked at the notification. He looked at the missile's assessed trajectory, the overhead architecture's initial solution, updated every 4 seconds as the boost phase continued. He looked at the assessed impact point, which the trajectory solution was projecting with the confidence available from boost phase observation, and which was pointing at open ocean approximately 260 nautical miles from the strike group's current position. He noted the assessed impact point with the professional attention of a person who has been briefed on DF-21D test parameters and recognizes that 260 nautical miles from the formation is not a distance that describes an engagement. It describes a test. He reached for the notification protocol regardless, because 54 seconds from launch notification to decision is not a margin that permits casual assessment, even for a trajectory that is pointing at open ocean 260 nautical miles away. Here is what made the 54-second window genuinely uncomfortable, and why the strike group commander was in the combat direction center at 4:05 rather than at 4:07. The DF-21D's maneuvering re-entry vehicle, the warhead section that separates from the second stage at the top of the trajectory and descends under its own guidance, is what makes the DF-21D distinct from a standard ballistic missile. A standard ballistic missile follows a ballistic arc. The impact point of a standard ballistic missile can be predicted with high confidence from the boost phase trajectory. The DF-21D's re-entry vehicle can maneuver. It can adjust its trajectory during the terminal phase. The magnitude of that maneuver, how much the re-entry vehicle can deviate from a purely ballistic descent, determines the size of the uncertainty ellipse around the assessed impact point. The larger the maneuver capability, the larger the uncertainty ellipse. The larger the uncertainty ellipse around an assessed impact point, 260 nautical miles from the formation, the larger the question of whether the assessed impact point accurately described where the warhead was actually going. The uncertainty ellipse at this stage of the trajectory, based on boost phase observation, before the re-entry vehicle's maneuver capability could be characterized from this event, was approximately 40 nautical miles in the along-track direction and 12 nautical miles in the cross-track direction. An uncertainty ellipse that is 40 nautical miles along the track and centered on a point 260 nautical miles away places its near edge at 240 nautical miles from the formation. 240 nautical miles, accounting for the maneuver capability that had not yet been characterized from this specific test event, was not inside the formation's immediate threat envelope. But not inside and comfortably outside are different assessments, and the uncertainty ellipse was going to shrink as the re-entry vehicle descended and the formation's own sensors began acquiring the terminal phase. The SM-3 Block 2 A battery was fully ready. The Aegis BMD combat system had the trajectory solution updated continuously from the overhead data. The formation's own SPY-1D radar arrays were tracking the re-entry vehicle from the moment it cleared the horizon at approximately 4:06:30, which was approximately 90 seconds before the assessed impact time. At the moment of SPY-1D acquisition, the uncertainty ellipse collapsed from 40 nautical miles to approximately 6 nautical miles because the SPY-1D's direct track data was considerably more precise than the trajectory extrapolation from boost phase alone. 6 nautical miles, centered on a point now approximately 200 nautical miles from the formation. The near edge of the uncertainty ellipse was now approximately 197 nautical miles away. The formation was not in the engagement envelope. The strike group commander, who had been watching this calculation update in real time since 4:05, noted the uncertainty ellipse collapse at 4:07. He noted the impact point assessment, now updated from the SPY-1D data. He noted the SM-3 battery's readiness status. He said 3 words to the tactical action officer, which were not a question. Track and collect. Track and collect. Not track and engage. Track and collect because the re-entry vehicle was not threatening the formation, because engaging a DF-21D test re-entry vehicle that is not threatening the formation would be an expenditure of a $12 million SM-3 Block 2A round against a test target in a way that would reveal the SM-3's engagement parameters to the people who were watching the test from the launch site. And because the intelligence product available from tracking a DF-21D terminal phase from acquisition to impact is considerably more valuable than the intelligence product available from intercepting it. You can intercept it later. You cannot unintercept it to collect from it. Track and collect. The SPY-1D on USS Antietam, positioned ahead of the carrier in the air defense station that places it with the optimal radar geometry for the threat bearing, was in full track mode on the re-entry vehicle at 4:07 and 3 seconds. The track was clean. The Aegis combat system was providing an updated position, velocity, and altitude solution for the re-entry vehicle every 0.3 seconds. The solution's accuracy was improving as the re-entry vehicle descended, and the SPY-1D's geometric advantage increased. At 4:07 and 45 seconds, the Aegis system produced the first characterization of the re-entry vehicle's actual descent profile. Not the assessed descent profile from intelligence estimates, but the observed descent profile from direct track data, measuring the actual deceleration rate, the actual descent angle, and the actual lateral displacement from the purely ballistic trajectory. The lateral displacement was 31 nautical miles at this point in the terminal phase. The purely ballistic trajectory extrapolated from the boost phase had projected an impact point. The re-entry vehicle was 31 nautical miles displaced from that projection, which meant the maneuvering system had produced a 31 nautical mile correction during the terminal phase. 31 nautical miles of terminal phase maneuver. The intelligence community's previous estimate of the DF-21D's terminal maneuver capability had placed it at between 20 and 40 nautical miles. 31 nautical miles was within that estimate. It was also now a measured value rather than an estimated value. What's the maneuver characterization? The strike group commander asked the intelligence officer, who had arrived in the Combat Direction Center at 04:06. Active maneuvering confirmed, sir. Lateral displacement, 31 nautical miles from ballistic projection. We're tracking the maneuver continuously. This is direct observation of the terminal guidance phase. A pause. The previous estimate was 20 to 40. We're now in the lower middle of that range, 31. Is the guidance active or pre-programmed? Active, sir. The displacement is occurring in pulses. We're seeing intermittent acceleration events rather than continuous maneuvering, which is consistent with an active guidance system making corrections rather than a pre-programmed ballistic adjustment. Another pause. Each correction is being logged with timing and magnitude. The guidance algorithm's pulse pattern is being characterized in real time. The guidance algorithm's pulse pattern. Each correction maneuver that the DF-21D's re-entry vehicle made during its terminal phase produced a measurable acceleration event in the Aegis track data. The timing between corrections, the magnitude of each correction, the direction, all of it visible in the SPY-1D's track solution, all of it being recorded by the Aegis system's data logging, all of it characterizing the guidance system's operating logic from direct observation at the highest signal quality available outside of actually possessing the hardware. The re-entry vehicle was demonstrating its guidance algorithm to the strike group's combat system at 0.3-second update intervals, and the combat system was writing it all down. At 4:08 and 17 seconds, 1 minute and 5 seconds after SPY-1D acquisition, the re-entry vehicle impacted. The impact was in open ocean, approximately 212 nautical miles from the formation's current position, approximately 31 nautical miles displaced from the original boost phase trajectory projection, and approximately 6 nautical miles north of the updated impact point assessment from the SPY-1D's initial acquisition solution, 6 nautical miles. The terminal phase had continued to maneuver after the SPY-1D's initial solution, and the additional maneuver had moved the impact point 6 nautical miles from where the Aegis system had assessed it would be at 0407. 6 nautical miles. The intelligence officer noted this with the focused attention of a person who understands that the difference between the Aegis system's predicted impact and the actual impact is a measure of how much additional maneuver the guidance system performed during the final 30 seconds of flight, which is information about the guidance system's reserve maneuver budget, which is information that every SM-3 engagement planner needs to understand when calculating intercept geometry. Final impact was 6 nautical miles from the SPY-1D's updated solution, the intelligence officer said. That's approximately 11 seconds of additional guidance correction after our last solution update. The guidance system had reserve maneuver capacity beyond what the terminal phase profile suggested at acquisition. Reserve capacity, the strike group commander repeated. Yes, sir. The terminal phase maneuver budget is larger than the acquisition phase data indicated. That's a planning input for intercept geometry calculations. The intelligence officer was already writing. This is going to the appropriate recipients. Track and Collect had produced something that Track and Engage would not have produced, which was the complete terminal phase maneuver profile of the DF-21D test re-entry vehicle from acquisition to impact, including the guidance algorithm's pulse pattern, the total maneuver displacement, and the reserve maneuver capacity revealed by the impact offset from the last solution update. A complete picture. A picture that the intelligence community had been building for 15 years from collection events of varying quality, and that had just received its most complete single-event contribution. The SPY-1D's collection had not been alone. The E-2D Advanced Hawkeye, at 22,000 feet on its early warning station, had been tracking the re-entry vehicle from boost phase separation. The Hawkeye's radar had a different look angle than the SPY-1D, and a different look angle produces a different aspect on the maneuver profile, which produces independent confirmation of the maneuver magnitude from a different geometric reference. The two independent track solutions, SPY-1D and E-2D, were cross-correlated as part of the standard BMD data fusion process, producing a maneuver characterization that was more accurate than either sensor could produce alone. The cross-correlated solution placed the total terminal phase displacement at 31.4 nautical miles with a measurement uncertainty of approximately 0.8 nautical miles, which is a measurement accuracy that the DF-21D's design team would probably not be comfortable with if they were aware that it existed. They were not aware. Their test had gone to planned impact in the designated test area. Their re-entry vehicle had performed within its design parameters. Their test had been successful by every measure available to the people who designed and launched it. They would not know about the SPY-1D track data. They would not know about the Hawkeye cross-correlation. They would not know about the guidance algorithm pulse pattern logged at 0.3-second intervals. They would know that their test had succeeded. The people watching it would know considerably more. "What's the downlink status?" the strike group commander asked. All data transmitted to PACOM and the appropriate intelligence recipients as of 0409, sir. The complete track file is being processed. The guidance pulse log is going to the technical analysis cell at the relevant agency for algorithm characterization. The intelligence officer looked at his notes. The preliminary analysis will be back within 48 hours. The complete characterization will take longer. What's the preliminary going to tell us? At minimum, sir. Confirmed maneuver magnitude, confirmed guidance mode, reserve capacity assessment, and a pulse timing characterization that the engagement planning community can use to update intercept geometry calculations for this specific threat. A pause. The intercept geometry update is the most time-sensitive piece. If this test changes the engagement planning parameters for the DF-21D, the Aegis BMD community needs that update before the next time this scenario isn't a test. Before the next time this scenario isn't test. The intelligence officer said this with the professional matter-of-factness of someone who understands that the purpose of the collection is not the collection itself, but the operational application of what the collection reveals. And the operational application is the engagement planning for the day when the DF-21D is not pointing at open ocean 260 nautical miles from the formation. At 4:15, the strike group resumed its standard transit. The watch section updated its logs. The SM-3 battery returned to standard readiness posture. The E-2D continued its station. The formation's Aegis systems continued tracking the air picture, which at 4:15 was exactly what it had been at 4:02. Unremarkable, routine, and managed by watch sections that were alert in the way that watch sections are alert at 4:15 after 4 hours of quiet transit. The one thing that was different from 0402 was 12 minutes and 43 seconds of SPY-1D track data on a DF-21D terminal phase, cross-correlated with E-2D radar and overhead infrared data, producing the most complete single-event technical characterization of the DF-21D's maneuvering re-entry vehicle, assembled to date. This data was already in the processing pipeline. The guidance pulse log was already being analyzed. The reserve capacity assessment was already being integrated into the engagement planning software update that the Aegis BMD community would receive on the timeline that software updates receive when they are marked urgent before the next deployment cycle. Chinese state media published a statement at 6 o'clock Hainan local time. The People's Liberation Army Rocket Force had successfully conducted a test of a conventional ballistic missile in the Western Pacific, demonstrating the operational capability and technical readiness of the People's Liberation Army's precision strike forces. The test had achieved its objectives. The missile had performed as designed. The test demonstrated that the People's Liberation Army possesses the capability to hold at risk any naval target in the Western Pacific at ranges consistent with anti-access and area denial doctrine. The statement was professionally worded. The conclusion it invited was clear. The USS Ronald Reagan, Strike Group's Watch Section, log for the period read 4:03 to 4:15, DF-21D ASBM test event. Boost phase detected 4:04, SPY-1D acquisition 4:06, impact 4:08, 212 nautical miles bearing 260. Track and collect posture throughout. SM-3 not employed. Complete track file transmitted. PACOM 0409. No hostile action. No course change. No damage. The intelligence annex was 8 pages. 8 pages that would update engagement planning parameters for every Aegis BMD capable platform in the Pacific Fleet. The PLA Rocket Force's statement described a successful test. The statement was accurate. The DF-21D had performed within its design parameters. demonstrated its guidance capability, and impacted in the designated test area. Every metric that the test was designed to measure had been measured. The strike group commander had measured them too. Both sides had measured the same 31-minute and 4-second event from the same observable data using different instruments for different purposes. The PLA rocket force had measured whether the system performed. The Aegis BMD community would measure how to defeat it. The performance data that confirmed success for one measurement set was the characterization data that enabled the other. The re-entry vehicle had performed as designed. The guidance algorithm had performed as designed. The reserve maneuver capacity had performed as designed. All of it now was characterized. The Western Pacific continued its transit southeast of the Miyako Strait. The stars were still exceptional. The sea state was still too. The watch section continued its routine. The engagement planning update was already in the queue. Bye for now.